You crack an egg into a pan every morning without thinking twice. It feels completely mundane, yet you are actually frying a biological masterpiece. A single cell engineered by millions of years of evolution to forge a breathing, blood-pumping creature. Now, think about our ancestors. They bled and fought off predators just to steal whatever random, wild eggs they could pry from nature. You, however, only devour one specific kind. Every single year, humanity annihilates over 1.2 trillion chicken eggs. That is 150 of them for every person currently breathing. But here is the magnificent absurdity of your breakfast. There are roughly 10,000 different bird species on this planet. Throw in the endless swarms of reptiles, amphibians, and fish, and the sheer volume of edible eggs is astronomical. Yet, only one reigns supreme. Why? The chicken did not conquer your fridge through culinary superiority. It conquered us through sheer evolutionary luck. Pure, unadulterated chance. Once a society gives the green light to one bird's egg, anything resembling it sneaks right through the back door. Quail eggs. They are basically the fun-sized, speckled cousins of your breakfast staple. Duck eggs, a bit richer, slightly thicker armor, but close enough to the blueprint that your brain hardly registers the switch. But here is where your delicate modern stomach hits a psychological brick wall. Transport yourself from that sterile, sanitized American kitchen to the intensely vibrant, smoke-filled streets of Southeast Asia. Here, balut is an everyday culinary triumph. It is a fertilized duck egg, incubated for weeks, then boiled and devoured with the partially formed embryo inside. Millions of people consume this with the exact same casual indifference you reserve for a morning bagel. Just reading that description probably made your sensibilities recoil in absolute horror. Psychologist Paul Rosen spent decades unraveling this exact gag reflex. What he uncovered completely shatters our dietary ego. Disgust is not a biological shield protecting you from poison. It is merely a software update installed by your local zip code. To your ancient ancestors struggling through brutal winters, calories were desperately needed survival fuel. Today, balut terrifies you not because it harbors inherent danger, but simply because you were never conditioned to embrace it. To those who were, it is just lunch. The biology of the egg remains flawlessly identical. Your palate is an illusion. Let us push the evolutionary boundary even further and look at the ocean. Fish sit on a branch of the tree of life so drastically removed from mammals that we barely recognize them as relatives. Yet, their unhatched offspring are treated as the ultimate symbol of human opulence. We gleefully drop thousands of dollars on a tiny, glittering jar of sturgeon caviar, or elegantly arrange neon salmon roe atop high-end sushi. This proves that evolutionary distance never dictated our menus. So why not feast on reptiles? Well, we absolutely did. Across Central America and Southeast Asia, sea turtle eggs were ruthlessly plundered from nesting beaches by the thousands, until the populations utterly collapsed. Today, they are shielded by global conservation laws. Down in northern Australia, heavily regulated Aboriginal communities still harvest saltwater crocodile eggs, which supposedly taste like incredibly rich duck eggs. The barrier was never biological disgust. It was simply human greed crashing into government regulation. But then we stumble upon the amphibians. Frog and toad eggs, those grotesque gelatinous clusters bubbling in stagnant swamp water, are completely absent from global cuisines. Why? Because while humans conquered the oceans and decimated the skies, the humble frog quietly waged biological warfare. They wrapped their offspring in zero-calorie, indigestible jelly, and laced them with mild, unpalatable toxins specifically designed to repel hungry mouths. They are the only creatures on this list that actively fought our insatiable appetite, and they actually won. There is a much darker layer to this illusion of choice, one stained by a catastrophic legacy. In the early 19th century, the skies over North America would physically darken for days. Passenger pigeons numbered in the billions. Billions of birds blocking out the sun. Their eggs were ruthlessly shoveled onto wagons and sold for pennies in bustling city markets. We treated their reproduction like a bottomless, magical well. Then the well abruptly ran dry. Within a few short decades of this relentless industrial-scale slaughter, the entire species violently collapsed. The very last passenger pigeon on Earth, a ghost named Martha, died entirely alone in a cage in 1914. This single devastating tragedy forced the creation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918. We abruptly criminalized the foraging of wild bird eggs not because our taste buds suddenly found them revolting, but because our reckless gluttony nearly wiped out the entire ecosystem in a single human lifetime. Long before those federal laws, ancient religions were already quietly constructing invisible walls around our plates. Millennia ago, kosher and Islamic dietary doctrines meticulously outlined which birds were spiritually permissible, strictly forbidding even the smallest blood spot in a yolk. These ancient codes were not drafted by modern food scientists or safety inspectors. They were sacred rules engineered thousands of years before we understood the mechanics of embryology. Yet, these ancient texts are still silently curating the exact layout of your local supermarket aisles today. We eat within historical cages. Then there is the psychological lock installed in your brain before you could even speak. Childhood imprinting is the strongest predictor of adult food acceptance. The window for adopting new foods without visceral disgust slams shut around age 3. If you grew up seeing balut, you feel absolutely nothing. If you only saw pristine shells in cardboard cartons, you naturally recoil. You were not born disgusted. That limitation was programmed into you. So what crowned the chicken? It comes down to a ruthless obsession with extreme biological efficiency. A wild bird drops maybe 20 eggs seasonally, but the modern hen, descended from the red jungle fowl, has been artificially warped by relentless selective breeding to pump out 300 eggs annually. Zoom in on a massive hyper-mechanized modern hatchery and watch it dissolve back through the millennia into the silhouette of a prehistoric farmer casually tossing scraps to a wild bird. We chose the most absurdly productive machine. Salmonella risks sealed our fate. We built a colossal infrastructure of vaccines exclusively around this bird, handing it a monopoly on safety. Stare at that egg sizzling in your pan right now. That mundane breakfast is actually a towering symbol of an empire built entirely on human laziness and economic efficiency. You are not eating the safest option. You are not eating the most nutritious option. You are not eating the best egg. You are merely eating the one your ancestors happened to pick first.